Hi, I'm Colleen Packowitz with Martin County Television. Our county is known for many things, like the quaint old Florida charm and pristine beaches. It is also growing as a supportive community for artists and the arts. Many world-renowned artists live here and find their inspiration here. As a leader in the arts community for over 30 years, the Arts Council of Martin County strives to instill passion for and participation through the arts. They do this through a variety of methods, including their Cultural Conversation series. The concept for this series is to create a dialogue between the artists and the public in small, informal settings, where the community can get an intimate, behind-the-scenes look at some of our cultural icons. Nancy Turrell is the Executive Director of the Arts Council of Martin County.
So Cultural Conversations is a way that the Arts Council can again reiterate its mission and role in the community, which is inspiring participation and passion for the arts in our community. I think getting in the hearts and minds of artists in our community and sharing those stories with the rest of everybody helps show why having creativity as part of a student's education, and really at every point in time in your life, doing something creative makes you a more well-rounded person. It soothes your soul, it feeds your heart, and it makes the community a better place to live when it's a very artful community.
To see a calendar of upcoming events at the Arts Council, you can go to their website at martinarts.org. Now, please enjoy MCTV's presentation of the Arts Council of Martin County's recent cultural conversation with local renowned artists Guy Coheleach and Geoffery Smith, hosted by Martin County's Tourism and Marketing Manager, Nerissa Okiye.
Well, I have to say, if you ever done a Google search on either of these two amazing artists, you'll get very nervous. I'm quite nervous. I have printed out just some of the items that come up for these both world-renowned artists. And so we're so excited that you are here to talk with us about your collaborations and working together and just what has inspired you as artists. Art enriches our lives, and it gives us that type of feeling. I mean, it's an amazing feeling. If it's looking at Charging Bull and your heart speeding up because you can just see the elephant coming at you, if anyone of you, or if any of you haven't seen Mr. Coheleach's Charging Bull, I mean, it really does make your heart race. Or if it's standing below the amazing sailfish sculpture and just looking at Mr. Smith's sculpture with a sense of awe. I mean, art really inspires everyone. So one thing I would like to know is what has inspired you two as artists, and how did you meet and start working together?
Money.
So who's paying who?
Yeah. Check hasn't cleared.
Yeah. Check hasn't. I love that. So when did you meet and decide to take on this student mentor, mentor-student type of relationship?
I'll let Geoffery answer that.
Okay.
So we've both been in town 20 years, and unfortunately our paths never crossed till a couple years ago. There was an event at my studio down in Port Salerno that Guy was at, and I met Guy, and I'm like, I forgot all about them again. I'm like, holy smokes, Guy Coheleach's in my studio. This is so cool. and you know, we have a lot of common interests and friends, and you know, from all over the country. And so we became friends, and I'd been dabbling painting a little bit, and so you know, he saw that there was a tremendous need that I could use some help.
I'm going to interrupt.
Oh, yes.
Probably one of his bad.
He's been helping me incredibly generously with sculpture, which is my favorite art form. And I've been painting in front of him because I don't know how to teach. And the response that needs to be known by everybody here is, I haven't finished a sculpture since I've met Geoffery, and he's already sold one of his paintings.
Okay.
Well, you like to sit on that one for a while, huh?
Yeah.
It goes back to that money thing.
So you started, what made you decide to move from painting to try to work on sculpture? You said it's your favorite.
Sculpture was my favorite art form at Cooper Union, and I didn't have anything to lose, so I could do anything I wanted, the way I wanted, without worrying about what anybody thought of it. And I did some pretty bloody nice things. I worked with hammered lead, I worked with stone, wood, and I just loved it. But it dawned on me that you couldn't reproduce it, so money isn't it's going to be scarce. So I became an artist.
Painter.
Well, painter, yeah. Well, I get nervous at these things. And I have the language of a barroom sailor, so if I slip tonight, please forgive me. I'm trying to behave myself.
And
This guy brings out the worst of me. My wife is staring me like I'm going to hear every tonight. And why did you do this? And why didn't you say that? So
you went into, Geoffrey, what inspired you to then go into sculpture versus painting or any other medium, and why now have you decided to work in that arena, that new medium?
Well, I started as a small child. Well, at age 15, I started carving duck decoys, and I did wood carvings, and that was my job. I was a busboy for one summer in high school. Other than that, I've had no real employment. So I did the duck decoys, and then I would sell them and make a little bit, and that was what I did all through high school and college. And I loved doing it, but I never felt I could support myself. So just like Guy, trying to figure out how to support my living. After I got out of college, I played around with some wax, and I made a little swan, and wasn't very good, but I sold 12 of them, and because with the wax, the casting process, you can do multiples, and I made $100 a piece on them, and I thought, wow, this could possibly work, and it took a little time. I did a few more, and the foundry cost is very, very expensive, so it's very hard to get started in sculpting. But I love doing it, and I've just kept at it, and I've never had a plan B.
So one thing that becomes apparent when you look at both of your artworks, with Mr. Coheleach, and I keep going back to the charging elephant because you just feel it. And if you haven't looked through some of the other exhibits here, charging elephant is not here. You need to Google it. There's another amazing elephant picture out there. It seems like you capture the detail of the animals. It's almost immersive. And then with you, Geoffrey, if you haven't been on his website, he has a video, and it's time-lapsed where he's showing the incredible process that goes through it. And you work in a lost wax medium. What would you say would be unique to your creative process? Is it the immersion? Is it you using a technique that's not around anymore? What would be one thing that you think, or one thing that you've taught each other that's unique in how you go about creating?
Well, Geoffrey mentioned he wouldn't mind learning how to paint, but he didn't do it that way. He's got more damn energy than 10 schoolgirls. And it's absolutely disgusting. I've been very intimidated by armatures. I'd made one once, and it was a complete disaster, and it kept me from going into sculpture years and years ago. And I go over, he says, come on over inside the mill and we'll talk about this. And while we're talking, he makes 2 or 3 of these armatures. I could kill him. I mean, it's so simple now. It's very easy to make an armature, but to make the one that you want for the sculpture, to make sure those bones or the armature fits in where it's going to be covered by the bronze or the clay or whatever, it's a different ball game. But he was so generous with his time and effort, and it dawned on me, I'm over here just receiving all the time. I said, well, let's get together and do some painting. And I don't know how to teach. I really don't. I can answer questions. And I said, the best thing to do is just, we'll paint together we'll paint the same thing. And he has a completely different approach than I do. And there's a lot of efficiency in his approach, meaning that he can get a saleable painting done in the morning, and it takes me many, many moves.
Now, Guy did have his biggest praise was, Geoffrey, you don't need to look at the photograph. Because my paint doesn't look like the photograph.
But the point is, it's not the way I would paint, because if I paint it like that, people think I've gone off my rocker. I've invested a lot in doing stuff like this, and it's something I apparently know how to do better than the average person. But a number of his things that I've seen would look great on a wall, just as a painting of color and shapes and everything. And oh yeah, that's a palm tree, or that's the ocean, and so forth. And because I can't identify with that, it doesn't mean I can't appreciate when I see one that I like. And he goes away on a hunting trip or a photographing trip or something, and he does a dozen paintings, for God's sakes. I mean, when I go to Africa, I used to go over there with oil painting, and all this garbage, and I had to you couldn't carry the inflatables on the airplanes even back then, so I used gasoline for turpentine. And all these guys are coming over the trackers and so forth, they're smoking, I've got gasoline. It never dawned on me. Unfortunately, what I wanted for my first sculpture has a lot of drawbacks. So I'll finish that one day, and in my case, when I finish this particular, I had 1.5 more paintings to finish, and then I'm going to do a sculpture, and I'm going to do it in 1 week. Now, we've got a lot of witnesses.
Yeah.
We'll get her done.
We'll get her done.
He said, oh my God, can I make money on this one?
And for you, what have you learned? Because I mean, you have a unique technique when it comes to painting, but what are some techniques or some tips that Mr. Coheleach has Guy has said, and it's just kind of clicked? Are there any things or any funny stories from working together? It seems like there's got to be loads of interesting stories.
How much time do we have?
I'm going to check with Nancy. But
So probably one of the biggest things to keep it going with Guy was, he had some, there's a lot to the sculpting that I take for granted. I've been doing it for so long, and to me, it's just routine, the things I do, and it was so refreshing for Guy to come in and not know how to do something, and then I would show him, and his eyes would light up. He'd go, "Oh wow, that's how and probably the most amazing. I have a big clay heater, which is just a crate that's lined with styrofoam, and it's got two inexpensive. It's got a heating element and a fan in it, and my biggest worry every day is make sure that's unplugged, because that's what causes historically most sculptors' studios to burn down.
Oh.
Electrical fire or something. So, and a couple of weeks ago, I had a long day. I just got to bed, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I unplugged that. And I drove back to the studio, and it was plugged in. So, but there's no smoke coming out of the building. But so Guy was in one morning, and we're working. I said, well, we give it a few minutes. The clay's got to get warm. He goes, well, he's sculpted before. He said, why do we want the clay warm? I said, well, we had a cup of coffee, and then pretty soon, so I reach in the thing and pull out this soft, and when the clay is hard, it's like a brick, and then as it gets warm, it gets softer, and you can get it too hot, and it can burn you. But there's that nice thing where you can, and there's nothing feels better than as a sculptor, pushing that clay around. And so I threw a big chunk of clay to him, and he grabbed it. Oh my God, this is wonderful! And so he didn't, because like if you're fighting with that cold clay, I mean, it's a miserable process, but that nice warm clay, and then as your shape, as it takes place, you refine it, the clay cools down, and then you do more detail and stuff. But it's really nice when it's warm. And so, Guy's been wonderful about, well, Geoffrey, you're busy, I don't want to waste your time. And what I've gotten from Guy is so much more, helping him sculpt, and he will get his cat done. And it'll look like a lot more like a cat than my cat painting will look like a cat, probably. So, but I get so much, it reaffirms the things that I learned over the years, and then I explain, and he's like, "Oh, that's genius." That's and so I get more out of it than he does. I mean, it's been really, more rewarding for me. So, not a waste of time. All good.
Okay. What are some of your most, in terms of being an artist, what are your proudest accomplishments in terms of recognition or places that both of you, heads of states, presidents, are constantly giving both of your works of art? I mean, that's quite an honor. The Pope was just given one of your sculptures. I think they said every head of state receives, is that the eagle painting that they received? No, but they received an eagle painting. What would be
print.
A print, not a painting? You're right. That money. Sorry about that. You're right. A print, but even then, the prints are they're something to cherish. What would be your greatest accomplishment as an artist? The thing that makes you go, that was really something special.
It's hard for me to, as an artist, okay, that clarifies it. Just surviving, coming out of New York and raising a family, very close family. And that's what it's all about, children, the grandchildren. And when I started going into art, animal art in New York City, forget about it. When I started out, the best known wildlife artist in America was Roger Torrey Peterson, and he was getting a couple $100 for his originals. Wow. And about 2 or 3 years after I started painting the paintings, and I had a portfolio together, and I went out to Reno, Nevada for the Missouri Safari Foundation and had this big leopard painting. Now, Bob Kuhn had raised the prices. He was getting about $1,300, $1,400 for his originals. And I had this big leopard painting, and Pam said, "I love that painting. I don't want to sell it." I said, "Well, that's my job." I said, "Look, I'll put a price on it. Nobody's going to touch it." We brought it out there, and we put a price of $21,000 on it. A hell of a lot more than, well, more than most of the artwork got put together. As the first painting sold.
Wow.
Some woman had come from a board of directors in a bank in Texas and heard about me from, I think, Roger, and she just said, "I have to have that painting." I said, "It's really not for sale. We got a price on so nobody would buy it." And what do you say? And then all of a sudden, good God, I sell that sucker. It's more than all the paintings I've done the last 3 years.
Wow.
So we sold it.
Yeah. Wow.
So now she knows that there's nothing on the wall that's sacred.
And for you, Geoffrey, what would be your greatest accomplishment as an artist?
My daughter's painting the look-down fish on the wall as we speak over there with Lynn Barella. Wow. And she painted a lot on the big alligator that truth be known, it was more Carolyn than me. But like Guy said, family and the kids and everything, probably the big, that's our biggest job, My Mark he's sold more sculptures than I have in the last week, I think. So he's got a good in with our gallery, though. Oh. Yeah, but he's just starting sculpting, and I'm trying to encourage him, maybe too much, so making it easy on him. But art-wise, when you get a piece done, there's kind of like, with a sculpture, there's like 3 different phases. When the clay's done, and then it goes to the foundry, and then the foundry's, probably a nightmare in the easiest sense. From your piece gets destroyed, and then you have this mold, and then a wax, and then halfway through it's very rough. We have videos that on the website or at the gallery that show all this. It's really fascinating. But then when you get that piece done, and the last phase of it is hours in the patina room where you're breathing toxic chemicals and applying it with a lot of heat and fire, and then this thing gets done, and it's gorgeous, and it's so great. And then the next time is when, like Guy was speaking of, somebody writes you a check and puts it in their house, and then they come, that's the reaction that the people get when they buy the piece. And then I have years later, and over and over, people have my work 20 years later, and they'll go on about how the light comes through the window and hits it, and they change it, and what they've named, like 2 geese. Something. It's wonderful, and the pieces they grow with you, and to create something like that, is fabulous. The Stuart sailfish, that's the icon of Stuart. I couldn't be more proud of that. It's a great, it's been wonderful, and we, everybody loves it, and I've had people. I moved to Stuart because of that fish. Wow. We came here, and that was in the town. I thought, what a great place! I got to, so it's been rewarding. And then the thing with the president and the Pope in May last year was, that was kind of mind-boggling, and so I'm very grateful. And it's a labor of love. I love doing it. It's not quite as lucrative as Guy might lead on, maybe it is for a painter, but but I love doing it. So
okay, I have a couple different directions. I'm trying to think of which one makes the most sense. So going back to wildlife, you're both really into that nature and wildlife art. When did you know that was your medium, and what has inspired you to continue to stay with that medium? Because consistently you're creating amazing pictures and sculptures of nature. So why nature, and then how has it inspired you to continue with that theme, or have you ever thought of leaving that and trying something new?
In my case, God knows I've done golf courses and race cars and horses and so forth, but I can't think of a better subject. These things on the wall, I get a lot of compliments, but those things are the way they are. They make you look good. They really do. I can't think of a better subject. Pam won't let me paint nudes.
And Geoffrey, the same question. Why wildlife and nature? And how has it inspired you to continue, or is it very similar to continue to go back to that subject matter?
I think we go back to when we were young children. My older brother once said, he goes, it's real simple. What did you want to do when you were 12? I wanted to go hunting and fishing and girls. What do I want to do when I'm 56? So
she's right. She's right back there listening. She's there.
But when you're out, hunting and fishing to me was just an excuse to go bird watching or scuba diving or all these adventures I did as a young man growing up. I love doing it today, and how to do it. You see the birds. You see it even just here on our way here. We stopped at the mural, dropped Carolyn off, and Alita pointed out, you could hear there's a little woodpecker in the tree, and it was, going like mad. And, we watched that for a few minutes, and, the animals are everywhere, and I think a lot of them are the barometers for us. if the animals aren't healthy, we're not healthy. And I think we've got a lot of, problems with everything in the world, and people need to realize what's going on. And I think the birds, I drive down the road, I see the birds in the ditch, I see the birds overhead. I love it, and I want everybody, I want everybody else to see them and get joy from them. And so that's why I try to create, add beauty to the world, and hopefully get people to, be more responsible and make this world a better place.
That connection to art and the environment, do you think your work or wildlife artists are leading the way in helping with conservation and protection? Because you're capturing animals that sometimes we worry about may not be there, or what can we do? Do you think there's that connection that can help with conservation and protecting of some of these amazing species?
Well, like a lot of the conservation groups, artists particularly, that like wildlife art, are very concerned about the environment. But, we do what we can, but like any windmill, there's always a people that when the environment interferes with profit, it loses.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big problems with free enterprise, and yet it's still the best system in the world. It's just how to grow these people with a conscience is, well, I don't know. I mean, there's few people more money hungry than I am, but no, seriously, but there are limits. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I could have done to make a lot of money that, no, it's wrong, in my opinion.
Geoffrey, you mentioned stopping along the way and seeing the woodpecker, and you both you've traveled all over the world, and you continue to call Martin County home. What about Martin County inspires you to continue to come back? And everyone who's here, we've fallen in love with this place, whether or not we've lived here for, in our case, just a few years or for a lifetime. Do you think, or what compels you to call? You could live anywhere, and you've traveled all over the world. What compels you to come back to Martin County over and over and over again? Is it just that connection to nature, or this is home, and what makes Martin County home? This is because I'm tourism, so this is some helpful tips. I can use this in my marketing of, I'm just saying.
We're going to pause for a commercial break.
Right.
Welcome to Martin County.
Come to my,
Home. No.
Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, you could live anywhere, and you live here, and what do you think, or do you think is special about the area?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Go first.
Well, it's a nice place to live. There are a lot of nice places to live. And there are reasons. One reason we came down here, we had a promoter back in the early 70s. That, in my case, they would take a show like this and bring it to a bank, and the bank would sell promotional prints and limited edition prints. And without getting into an incredibly interesting story about this guy's promoting, we met the Hudsons, Dale and Cork Hudson, and we came down and we were treated like kings, and everybody we met were really nice people. So we always kept coming back in that sense. We had a place on the ocean for about 30 years. Well, 30 years ago, I had a studio in one of the condo places here in Stewart, and we've always had something coming back and forth. So there are a number of really great places to live, but mainly because of the Hudsons and the tie-in, it was easy to come back, and you don't go into an area cold and not know anybody. And Pam's a very social person. She likes to know people. Incidentally, nobody's asked what my favorite painting in the room is.
Oh.
It's that elephant. And let me tell you a quick story. I don't want to take time away from Jeff. I led a tour to Africa once, and I never worked so bloody hard in my life. I swore I'd never do another one. However, Dale and Mary Hudson wanted to go, and they've been wanting to go, and they come on a trip. all right, we'll come along. Now, don't expect anything. I'm not going to witness you. You know, we're going to have a tour guide and ask him the questions. Besides, you'll get the right answers. Make a long story short, we're following this breeding herd of elephants, which is very interesting because there's always a lot of activity, but it can be very dangerous with mothers and calves. And we're following them in this big Land Rover. And Mary Hudson is sitting back up here above me. I'm in the middle seat of this Land Rover going down. And I forget, Pam, I think you were in front of me down below. And we're getting into this very heavy stuff. And all of a sudden, this matriarch who's running she sees us and he turns the engine off. Now, I want the engine running. So seriously. And he said, it's not going to do any good. He said, we can't go fast here. We're right in the thick of grass this high. And the matriarch, Mary and Dale will back this up. How far was that matriarch from where we were?
Probably 25 feet.
Wow.
And I mean, closer than that wall, I'll tell you. And she had all of these others, and we couldn't move. Oh. So he said, and Mary said, oh, this is wonderful. She's taking movies, and she's taking all of these movies and having a super time of it. And all of a sudden it dawned on us, she's not at the zoo. Yeah. And we all quieted down, and the matriarch quieted down and kept an eye on us, and they didn't move for a while. Wow. And then they had to have a painting of that incident. And I really loved making the painting because it's such a wonderful story with dear friends on a wonderful trip. And that's probably one of my favorite. I don't think I've ever worked as long or hard on a painting as that one. Simply because I wanted to, you know. A lot of this stuff you do because you got a deadline for this show or that show. And I didn't mean to take all your time, but I had to bring that one up.
No, that's,
So my introduction to Stuart was probably 1990, and I was starving sculptor, single, didn't have but 2 nickels to rub together. I had met another painter from Zimbabwe, and I wanted to go to Africa, and I didn't, have the means to do it, and so he's like, oh, well, my dad's got a couple of ranches, come on over. So I figured, got my airfare, and so I was flying through Miami, and Renee Headings, Renee Bemis now, she's the current president of the Society of Animal Artists. She and her husband lived in Palm Beach Gardens, and so I was going to Miami. That's not that far. So, and again, I was a single guy, with no responsibilities. So they're like, well, we'll just stay over a couple days in Florida from Montana on your way to Africa. Still a couple of days to fly over there from here. And so Renee, we went out fishing, and then she took me up to Hobe Sound. She goes, there's this little gallery. It's kind of a hole in the wall, but the guy's a real great guy that runs it, and he sells a lot of art, and that was John Payson. So that's how I met John, and he had a big show for me, and he sold my work for years, and that was great. Then I went off to Africa for 5 weeks and came back, and I'd come down here, I met people, and I think what's so wonderful about Stuart is the people. I mean, there's, everywhere I look, there's just, wonderful, great people. I have, best friends in the world, guys like Guy, So, but it's Stuart's so neat being in South Florida is that you go farther south and the population density gets so great. I mean, I don't, until you get into the Keys and stuff, but it's a wonderful place to live. It's been a great place, raising my family. So.
Now, not that we want people to leave here, but you all have traveled around the world. Where are some of your favorite places to visit? You've mentioned Africa, both of you. Is there some place that compels you to come visit over and over again because they have the the wildlife you want to capture, or just because you go in that area and it's just so inspiring? What are some of your favorite places to travel to?
Well, there's so many wonderful places.
Yeah.
I mean, Alaska, the Canadian Rockies, our own Rockies, Grand Canyon. I mean, but for me, Africa, the first time I went over there, it was almost a mystical experience. And the second time, I never dreamed I'd ever get back there. I've been there over 100 times. But the second time I went, I'm in the bus from Nairobi Airport going into town, and I felt like I was coming home. It was weird.
Yeah.
So there's a connection there that I don't understand. And to me, if I go to heaven, it's going to have Kilimanjaro right next to Victoria Falls. And it doesn't work like that.
And for you?
The places Guy mentioned too, I spent 18 years in Montana, and I love it up there.
Yeah.
Winters are brutal, and you know, I think and I've been to Alaska and parts of Canada and things. I haven't been to Iceland. I want to go there. I hear great things about that. But I think traveling, you know, north and south. I mean, the birds figured it out, you know, and that's what we have here, the snowbirds.
That's
you know,
true. Yeah, that's
you know, it's pretty simple, you know.
Yeah.
There's a reason for the migration, and you know, not that Stewart's actually a lovely, better place to live in the summer than most of the country. You know, 'cause, I mean, it's cooler and nicer, and you know, but I with the kid, you know, with a big family, it's kind of hard till a few more of them leave the nest where you can get that and be, you know, in two spots. But I love the West, the Rockies.
So besides Guy's cat, what's new on the horizon for both of you? Finishing your sculpture, and within a week.
No, when I finish the painting I'm
Okay.
on now and one other Western painting,
Okay.
then I will do the sculpture within a week.
Within a week. Is there anything else on the horizon besides that? Any new trips or any new things that we need to be on the lookout
Well, I
for?
keep saying Africa, not this year, but it always pops up.
Jeffrey?
I've got half a dozen things in clay, you know, kind of, you know, indoor size, and that I've got to get off to the foundry. And then I don't have any big commissions lined up right now, which I kind of want to do some things for myself. I want to do like the birds on Colorado, but have, you know, a series of all the birds, you know, bigger, you know, just you know, halfway between Colorado and the sailfish, you know, so maybe 10, 12 footers, you know.
Wow.
So,
I think, do I have time for one more?
Sure, and if you want to take a couple maybe from the audience.
Okay, yeah, I'll open it up to the audience. I have a funny question though, but any questions for the audience while we have these amazing artists here? I'm sorry, I've been intrigued. I've been keeping them to myself. Any questions from the audience? In the back first, and then in the front up here. Yes, sir.
Hi. For much of the 20th century, realistic art, whether in sculpture or painting, was very out of favor. And Guy, you especially came of age in the era when abstract art was lionized. And Geoffrey, you're a bit younger, but similarly. And yet, more recently, there's been a rediscovery of the beauty of realism. And what were your thoughts about that? Were you ever tempted towards abstract expression in art or not?
There's good art and there's bad art. There's good abstract art and there's bad abstract art. I went through Cooper Union right in the middle of the early 50s, right in the middle of Korea, and to do representational art, I had a son, I won't mention his name, but I really couldn't stand the man. He taught copper plate and zinc engraving, And it was very interesting. And he loved what I was working on until I put in the numbers on the football players. And it was an abstract, but the numbers identified it, and all of a sudden you could read what was going on. And he berated me in front of the whole class. And I know people with personalities, they would have been absolutely crushed. I was so damn mad I was ready to throw him out the window. But then I realized, you know, if you want to do realistic art, you better figure out some way to beat this. And then I went to a show on 57th Street, and Andy Warhol had a can of Campbell's soup, piece of garbage, for $65,000. And that's when I put the $21,000 price tag on it. And I said, I don't care, I'd rather have the painting than anything less than that. And I got pig-headed. And you're absolutely right, the 50s in particular were devastating for realistic artists. And at least in our genre, I was one of the guys that you raise the price, and my worst enemy, and I've got a lot of them because I've got a big mouth, and I'll give you an honest answer. And it's very abrasive, and I probably shouldn't do it as much as I did. But, well, no, seriously, at any rate, it was very, very tough. And then all of a sudden, you had a lot of these old illustrators losing their jobs to photography and starting to paint landscapes, Western landscapes, because the Westerners didn't give a hoot about New York art. And God bless them, Turpinning, I didn't like his early work, but Howard Turpinning can get over $500,000 for one of his paintings. He's still alive, and his recent work is unbelievably good. And he didn't care if he ever went to New York. And all of a sudden, New York realized we're missing out on something big here. That's my not so humble opinion.
On the abstract art, when I was in college, you know, you're always trying to, you know, maybe game the system a little. And so I always took art classes, and I would always tell the teacher that I do these wood carvings, and then I sell them, and then I immediately told, well, that's not art. Oh. You know, art has to have this social connection thing, which I thought it did. I liked the ducks, so. I was at Montana State University in Bozeman, then at summer I went home to Billings and the Eastern Montana College, and they had an independent art study project. I thought, wow, I can get some easy credits, get an A. It was during the oil boom, and there was a gallery in town, best gallery in Billings, at Gallery 85, and they were going to have a show for me in the fall with Jim Killen, the painter, and myself. And I had to, so my summer job was to make a bunch of carvings for the show in the fall. And then I thought, well, I went to the college. They had this program. I said, here's what I'll do. And I brought a little rosewood trout, beautiful trout carved out of rosewood, to the head of the art department. And I thought I was, you know, pretty smart. I was probably dressed like this, little blue blazer, all preppy, and I told the guy what I was doing. Not you guy, but you know, I said, well, I'm having this show, best gallery in town. You know, it should be really good, and I'm going to work all summer. I said, what I'd like you to do, I had it figured out for him, so he just had to, you know, give me his signature on the bottom, and I said, just come in and critique it. It'll just take you, you know, very quickly, and bam, then we're all done. Well, and then I got the lecture. Oh, that is a trout, but it's not art. And, you know, there was no way that their art department could be involved in such a, you know, fraud. I said, well, I don't understand. He goes, well, let me explain it to you, because he was a teacher. He said, well, now, if we put a briefcase handle on top of the trout, then it would, you know, have a social interaction with people. Say like if you were on the subway going to work and you had this trout, and then you could think about it, you know. So I'm like, that was. I said, well, no, actually, it's just a trout, and and my show was we sold everything, and it was wonderful, and that was good. But one of my friends in Denver, David Parvin, he was a life caster. He would cast bodies, and great guy, and he did teacher stuff. But he said about abstract art, he said it's made by the untalented, sold by the unscrupulous to the utterly bewildered. I always thought that was kind of. Now there is lots of really good abstract art, and that's what I'm trying to do with my paintings more. That's why I said they don't look like the picture. They're a little bit out there, so I'm having fun with it.
You had a question up front here, yes.
Yes, you brought up photography a couple of times. Do each of you work primarily from photographs? Do you sketch in life? Do you work from memory? What's your method?
Well, this is the finest camera I ever made, because you have it with you, but it distorts everything. You know, it changes the colors for you, and I mean, good or bad, but you know, things are different. So photographs are you know, huge, and videos, you watch things, but getting a feel for the animal, knowing what, you know, Guy talking about the elephant, the story could be the same of the turkeys or the mountain lion or the buffalo, you know. You can tell when an artist knows the subject matter. You can tell when it's just copied from a photograph. I mean, I think there's quite a bit to that. I know one painter said, you know, the paint, how long does it take? He said, an hour on the easel and a lifetime on the ocean, you know, and it could be anything, but knowing what you're looking at, I think, is huge. And then how you get your reference. In the old days, you know, collecting books and pictures, all that, it was very hard to get good reference material. Now, almost to the detriment, you know, you can, in 0.2 of a hundredth of a second, you can have 1 million images on Google. So it's a different world.
I started out using, you know, reference material, which was pictures. And I'd cut out magazines, and then I'd take photographs, and had a little brownie box camera back in the 30s and the 40s, and left a lot to be desired. But the image was there. And when we moved to New Jersey, I had this, the studio was about the size of this room, I guess, a separate building. And I had a wall of the big 4-drawer file cabinets filled with magazine clips. I mean, thousands and thousands. Through the years, I just see something, I'd cut it out, put it in there. And then filing them and getting them in order where you can retrieve them, that is a job. At any rate, when we moved to Jersey and the computers came along, I bit the bullet and had over 100,000 pictures scanned. And now I can carry what used to be in about 30 cubic feet of space. I can fit it in a postage stamp in my pocket. It's incredible. When I did the swordfish, the sailfish in there, which the paint may still be wet for all I know, but I have this big cardboard thing, and I have maybe 12 pictures of sailfish jumping out of the water. And that's one way to get the characteristic look. Any photograph can look great, but you just might get a little distorted or a little weird character impression in that one photograph that can lead you astray, and you repeat what isn't normal in that photograph. The best way I used to have is get going, get a movie, and then make a loop out of it, and sit down, suck a few beers, and just watch that loop going over and over. Then you can sit down and you don't need to look at anything. It's up here. So that, but the photography today is so good that any renderer, if he gets a good photograph, can make a good painting. And the way I grew up, Ed Morgan, what do you mean you copied a photograph? Well, it was easier. Well, and that was a mortal sin to Ed Morgan, who was just one of these generous guys that tried to help me.
Additional question? Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that amazes me is the kind of texture that your paintings have. I mean, you could see the feathers, you could see every little hair on some of the animals and things. It's just amazing to me. It's as, I mean, I can't even imagine that you could get that from a photograph. You know what I'm saying? If I take a picture of an animal like that at any distance, you'll never see on the photograph the kind of detail fur and things that you manage to somehow get. It's like the fur is sitting here and you're looking at it and painting from it. I mean, how?
Well, after 80 years, it's pretty easy to know what it's supposed to be. Getting it to look like what it's supposed to be is very easy now because Pam puts the numbers in on all of these.
All right. We're one last or we're done? Nancy is wrapping us up. I cannot thank you both enough. This has been inspiring, and thank you both for your time.